So continuing on with the slides from the GUI slides. The next one is determining event sources, the next section. And this is actually a pretty interesting section. So this is, and for this particular one, they kind of talk about event handling, and they make this application that pretty much just has a flow pane and two buttons. One they call the red button, one they call the blue button. And if you look, they instantiate the red button and they pass in an event method to it. And for the blue button, they pass in the same method. So both of these buttons, when they're clicked, they're actually going to call the same method, which is pretty interesting. So what they do in that method that's going to get called is they take the event that's being passed in and they're checking the source. And if the source is equal to the red button, then they'll set the background color of the pane to be red. And if it's not the red button, then what they're going to do is set the background color to be sky blue. So this is a pretty interesting approach. It's actually a really small program. You guys can create this if you want. Yeah, it's pretty small, and it's just two buttons in a pane, and they just demonstrate on how to handle those events. You know, passing the same method for both of those buttons. Pretty interesting. The next section is the fonts. You guys can kind of read through that. There's different ways of setting fonts. I'm not going to go through that. But I do kind of want to talk about the checkbox and the radio button section. Whenever it comes to controls that I think are interesting to what we may or may not do for the remainder of the semester. Like I said, I'm not really going to grade you on GUIs, but I think they're important to learn so that you can make nicer programs. They're all optional, but some of the projects I am going to ask you to create GUI projects. Optional in the sense that you don't have to have all this stuff memorized to prepare yourself for the exam, but you are going to have to actually use some of this stuff to make your programs. All right, so checkboxes, I'm just going to go through these slides. So we have the Checkbox class, which represents a checkbox in JavaFX. They give an example of using it using a program they call the styles option. So it looks like they have a custom pane called style option, and this is it. So if you check bold, then the font is going to be bold. If you check bold and italic, then it's going to be bold and italic. And if both of them are unchecked, they don't show an example of this, but I'm assuming that the font won't be bolded or italicized. So they're saying this layout uses two panes called the H-box and the V-box. The H-box pane arranges its node in a single horizontal row, where the V-box pane arranges its node in a single vertical or single column vertically. Styles option panes extends V-box, and it's used to put the text box above the checkbox. So basically what they're saying is they're using the V-box to put this text box above this group of checkboxes. And then they give you an example of what they did. So their styles pane extends the V-box. They have their phrase. They have the checkbox, or they have two checkbox, the bold and the italic. And then in their constructor, they have their phrase. They set the font. Oh, they actually set the font to like a particular font, and then they made it size 36. And then they instantiate their checkboxes. Looks like both both checkbox actions are getting the same method, the bold and the italic. And then they create a H-box pane, and they pass in the bold and the italic. And you can the checkbox actually has a label with it. So in the checkbox object, you put like what you want to say in front of the checkbox, and it'll say that in front of that checkbox. And they're positioning them in the center, and they put 20 for their spacing. There's a set spacing on this H box, and then they just call it get children add, and then the phrase and the options pane. So they basically added, so they basically have a pane that has a component, the phrase, and then they have a pane, and they also added the HBox pane. And the last thing was the method, what the method does. So if it checks to see if the bold checkbox is selected, if it is selected, then it sets font weight, it sets weight to bold. Okay, they set this to normal. Is it font posture? I guess font posture is how we set italics, the italics. They set it to normal and regular. And then when you click the checkbox for bold, they'll bold it. And then when you click it for italic, they'll italicize it. And then they'll just set the font of the phrase to this based off of what we did with the checkboxes. It's actually pretty interesting. And let's see. So the event handled in the event handler method is called when either checkbox is toggled. Instead of tracking which box was changed, the method just checks the current status of both the checkboxes accordingly. So it doesn't matter which event was triggered, it just checks them both. Okay, then they talk about radio buttons. So I kind of feel like I should do that checkbox example. So I'm gonna hop over to IntelliJ, and I'm gonna come over here, create a new project, and let's go to next, and we'll say GUI, and checkbox. Okay, so I'm gonna hit finish. We'll say this window, come over here, and we'll add a new class. I'm gonna go with launcher again, and it's going to have the public static void main method inside of here. It's going to extend the application class. God dang it, I have to add all that crap in there. All right, so I'm going to have to come over here and do go to file, project structure, and go to library. Go to program files, then I have a JavaFX, go to lib, hit OK. I have to do this every single time. Yeah, just kind of makes me just want to use 1.8 all the time. Okay, so I'm going to hover over this and then just import the JavaFX class. Okay, and I'm probably gonna have to do my edit configuration as well that we talked about before, but I'll do it if I run into the same problem. Okay, so from here, what I'm going to do is I have to implement this method, the start method, and then come over here and just say launch, and then pass in the args, and then from here is where I'm going to like make, they call it like the style options pane, and we'll just, they said pane is equal to new style options pane. Okay, and they instantiate that object, and they have their scene. Is equal to new scene, and they pass in the pane, and they set their size. They've just been going with 500, 500, and then I don't think it had a color. I don't know where they set the color. So I mean, I guess it did have a color. It goes like a blue, but they think they might have set it in the pane. But let's just choose a color. What can we go with? I don't like any of these colors. Let's go with like a bluish, blue violet. Okay, that works. Blue violet. Okay, and let's import this class. Okay, this is upset because it doesn't know about the pane yet. And then the stage, we're gonna just set the title. We'll just say style options. And I misspelled that. And then stage, set the scene, scene and stage show. Okay, so we're basically gonna just work on the style options pane, and we're gonna go ahead and create class style options pane, and nothing for the default package. And this is gonna extend the VBox JavaFX layout VBox, and then they had two checkboxes that they had as instance data. They had one for bold and one for italic. So I'll say like bold checkbox and italic checkbox. Okay, and then in their constructor, they basically created that label that was above. So they had the label, and we'll just say, just call it label. They had some text here. I forgot exactly what it said, but it was something like style options. Okay, and then they had like font. They had like a font. We'll just say like font, and this new font. They gave it a family and a size. I think it was 36. Import the class, okay, and the family was Heltikovic. I don't know how to spell that, dang it. All right, let me just look back at the example. And where was it? Yeah, Helvetica. Actually, I still don't know how to spell it. I'm just going to copy this. Make it easier on me. Okay, so we set our font that way, and then we'll just pass that over here. Set font. All right, perfect. And then they worked on their, they basically just worked on the two checkboxes. So bold checkbox and bold checkbox, and they said new checkbox. They give it a title, color from bold, and then they set the action. Yeah, okay, and then we're going to use this, and then we have to make this method, but we'll just say this is do checkbox action. Okay, perfect. Okay, and come over here and make this italic. Let me make that a capital. All right, and this is the italic checkbox, and we'll use the same event. Okay, perfect. So the other things that they were doing, like, let me just hop over. I don't want to get this wrong. So yeah, set spacing. Okay, they basically just added this to a HBox. So it's going to be another pane. So they said HBox, and we'll say box, I guess, and new HBox. And they passed in the bold checkbox and then the italic checkbox. Okay, perfect. And then what they did with this is they set alignment, and that was center, right? So set alignment was center, and then set spacing was 20. Okay. To position dot center, and then the spacing was 20. Okay, perfect. I think everything is good so far. Okay, and then they set the spacing of this vertical box which the style pane is, because it's inheriting from the VBox to 20. And then to add everything, they just said this.get children, and they add all children, or add all, and they added the label and the hbox, which we called box. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we got to make this method right here. Let's see if we can just hover over it, go to create method. Perfect, it made it for us. Right, we typed in what we wanted to name it. I hovered over it, press enter, and actually created it for us. All right, this is the part where I forget everything that they did. So I'm going to hop over and look at it because they're using like some attributes like weight, font weight, and font. Damn, I forgot what the other one was. Let me look. So they're using font weight and font posture. Okay, so I'm basically gonna just make a font weight object, a font posture object, check to see what checkboxes are created, because if the bold checkbox is created, then I change the weight to bold. If the italic checkbox is selected, then I change the posture to italicize, and then I pass in that information to the font of the phrase. I named mine label. And you know what, now that I'm looking at this, there's no way for me to see this label right here on line 14. There's no way for this method to see it. So this actually has to be instance data as well. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say private label, and I'm going to call this one phrase, since they called theirs phrase. And then instead of doing this here on line 15, I'm going to say phrase. Okay. And the line 16, I have to change this to phrase. All right. And then on line 29, I want to change that label to phrase. Okay. So I just basically changed the name of my label to phrase. Okay. So font weight object, and they called it weight. And they said the font weight is normal. That's the default. And then font weight, oops, I'm sorry, it's font posture. And then posture is font posture. Oh shoot, I messed that up. Font posture is regular. Okay, perfect. And then just check to see, okay, well, if bold checkbox, man, we can make this so much easier if we use the ternary operators. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. It's actually a chapter 5 or chapter 6 topic. Here they're trying to use if statements, but we could just come over here and just do this. We can say like bold checkbox, if it is selected, then you'll use the font weight of bold. If it's not selected, then you use normal. That's how this reads. Is they check this condition. If condition is true, you use this. If it's false, you use this. We're going to do the same thing with the italic checkbox. So selected. If it is selected, then we use the font posture of italic. If it's not, then we'll use regular. And then we'll just get our phrase, set font, and the font is, dang it, was it set font? No, they just said like new font, and then from here they use Helvetica, and then I have to learn how to pronounce that correctly, and then the weight, the posture, and then the size. Did that work? It didn't work. Dang it. You might have that out of order. I don't know. Let me check really quick. Yo, font. I'm doing like new font. Okay, so there's like a static method on the font class to create a font. And it's this one right here. Font and the name, the weight, not that one. The next one. The name, actually it's the next one. The name, the weight, the posture, and then the last one is the size. All right, perfect. Looks like this is going to work, except I'm probably going to have to fix my VM options Okay, so let's try this. Run. Okay, perfect. It didn't run. I gotta fix my VM options, I believe. Yeah. So let me do that really quick. So if you remember, in order to do this, I have to come over to edit configurations and then come over here and paste something inside of here. I was able to find that on this website. So I'm just going to copy all of this here and come back over to my VM options and then update this path right here to be the location of where I have my my JavaFX 15 library. So I'm just going to paste that path in and hit apply, hit OK, and then rerun. Perfect, right? Well, not really perfect. I think I'm supposed to center this. Okay, so hit bold, hit italic. The italic doesn't work. I must have messed something up on that. Okay, let's look at what I did wrong with the italic. Scroll down. If italic is selected, that should have worked. Oh, I see what I did wrong. So on line 24, I copied and pasted lines 20 and 21, and then I was just trying to make it quicker on myself, but I had a copy paste error where I forgot to set the italic checkbox to call this method whenever you click that checkbox. So let me rerun this. Okay, so bold, italic, and then neither. Okay, pretty cool. That's a checkbox.